You're listening to the Perth Property Show, Australia's only weekly property podcast by West Australian experts for West Australian listeners. Catch your latest episode every Monday at 7 a.m.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Perth Property Show. My name is Trent Fleskens, your host as always, and it's that time of the quarter where we get back in the studio with my man Brendon Ptolomey to chat about the regional market. Brendo, how you going?
G'day, Trent. Good to be here, mate. How are you?
I'm good. You just got off the plane from the East Coast. What's the property market looking like there right now?
Okay, yeah, I was in Sydney this week and really interesting talking to our team. The upper end of that market, as in the, I suppose we could say luxury end, but that is still very active. Still a real struggle in terms of buying something at what we would consider in Perth a reasonable price. And I think the indicator that we use is that the median house price, according to a couple of indicators, is heading towards $2 million in Sydney.
That's for the house, isn't it? Not the home.
Yeah, that's a house on a single residential block. But I am still shocked each time I have a look at a sale that it's $5 million and what you get for that. Clearly,
what do you get? Give us an example.
So you get, it seems to me you get a character type house on a single residential block that's anywhere upwards of about 500 square metres of land. And depending on which suburb that block will be, relatively large to relatively small by average standards. And you're within a 30-minute drive of the CBD of Sydney, and you could be east side or west side in terms of location. Yeah.
Okay, so we're talking about Bassendean. Is that a good example? Character house, 30 minutes from the city, or even further,
yeah.
Guildford?
Yeah, no, I think that's not a bad perception.
For $5 million.
Yeah, and then what we were reflecting on in our office with this conversation is, so if you're paying, say, because there's some valuation records being hit in places like Winthrop and Willetton at the minute south of the river, and we were just wondering out loud in our office is if they're $2 million now, is that the type of thing that reflects the comparison to Sydney? If you go Northern Beaches in Sydney, you'll spend $5 million in those suburbs up there pretty quickly as well. And so is that a reflection of $2 million in Winthrop, Willetton, south of the river here, and then if you go north of the river, you're hitting those numbers in Duncraig, that type of location now. Yeah.
So is it nearly impossible for us as Western Australians, and I know we're on a regional chat here, but I want to talk to you, given you just got off the plane about it, this to fathom Bayswater is $5 million rather than $1 and a bit mil? Like, I personally struggle to fathom that level of asset wealth and how that would disproportionately warp the way people view their own personal wealth and their friends' personal wealth and things like that, simply because they grew up in Bayswater and now their house is $5 million.
Yep. This is a really interesting discussion to have, probably needs a psychologist, and needs to really delve into the minds of the people in Sydney that this has happened to, because it has become a standard. If you bought something along the beaches in Sydney for $2 million 5+ years ago, it's easily worth anywhere between 5 and 10, depending on the quality of the asset and what you bought. And so that's quite mind-blowing in terms of as you're alluding to, the wealth creation. As long as you manage the equity you've created there along the way, it creates a lot of possibilities. And so then you get back to the Perth question. Can we see that horizon? We're so used to a boom and then a correction in our marketplace, and it's so recent that we had a correction. It's still really difficult for us as valuation professionals to get our heads around that concept.
But all the metrics are there.
The metrics say that's what will happen in the future. Yeah, in particular in good locations close to city centres. I think the thing that needs to evolve the most for Perth is the evolution of our economy. And so that's the diversification away from the mining industry and into things like the education industry and the defence industry, because that probably gives us the best chance to consolidate a multi-disciplined city in terms of creating that wealth.
If you think about AUKUS coming in, and AUKUS is something that is a brand new impact on, just by happenstance, a location that was pretty much lowest socioeconomic part of Perth Metro.
Yep.
We're seeing houses in Medina and Aurelia that were at $280,000 for 900 square metres back in 2018.
Yeah.
For $800,000 now. You put AUKUS in, it hasn't really impacted the market yet. Is there a horizon there where you're in what was the lowest socioeconomic LGA, the city of Kwinana, where all the houses are just $1 million because you've constantly got this government-funded push of hundreds, if not thousands, of people that need to live there for a long time, keeping prices high?
Yeah, potentially that happens into the future, and this isn't investment advice. Everyone needs to do their own homework, but it will be ironic if that leads to that outcome, because those suburbs are there to support the industry that was established in the 50s and 60s in Karratha, and
which was Alcoa, right?
Yeah.
It was working class, low socio-demographic, economic people.
Yep, and they created housing for the workers to live in down the road from where they'd be working. Yeah, and again, that's what we're facing with AUKUS into the future here.
Yeah, when you say reasonable prices in Perth, it's just hard to fathom reasonable. We're talking about the equivalent of East Wanneroo or Ellenbrook or Baldivis, where the price of a new property is between $1.5 and $2 million.
Yeah.
And so we're at the 750 to 850 space right now. And so it does continually remind us, if you ever go over to Sydney, to have a look at the real estate agent windows, that we are still in a lucky place in terms of affordability relative to our brothers and sisters across the Nullarbor in Sydney who have grown up with a very similar upbringing to us, but actually are dealing with a very different reality right now. It's happened to them. It wasn't something they created in terms of really smart investment choices. People just lived somewhere, and now their house is worth $5 to $10 million. Where with us, we're sitting there going, "Wow, 1.5 mil. We got a really expensive house right now."
Yeah, absolutely.
It is quite hard to fathom. But let's push on to the regional market update, and let's start at the top today, Brendo.
Yeah. Look, that's Karratha, and the feedback from Mel, our valuer in Karratha, is, to quote Mel, it's going off. And the judgment on that is that there's a 1% vacancy rate happening in town up there at the moment. There's very little supply in terms of purchase activity. It's jumped about 10% in the last 4 months or so, and that activity is investors coming through into the market to clean out some of the product.
Why, though? Because I would have thought that the narrative has been over the last 6 months, hey, Samandu's coming in, we're a bit nervous about the fact we don't understand how the iron ore price is still around $100. It seems like the last time you'd be buying into it right now. Sure, if you're ready in, keep enjoying the rent. But you and I have sat here and looked at each other going, there's not really a lot of signals to suggest it's a great time to get into Karratha. So why is it happening right now?
Yeah, I think those those rents are really solid in terms of that vacancy rate. There's no chance of your rent going down. And then I think there's a real push out there in the marketplace, whether you live in WA or elsewhere in Australia, that people are really chasing yield at this point in the market.
Is that because of cost of living? Like they're trying to offset cash flow maybe?
Yeah, potentially. And I think it's also the downward cycle in interest rates. So everyone's looking forward to the interest rate cycle decreasing, and they're looking at what that return they get for their cash in the bank, and they're going, I'm going to go look elsewhere and take the initiative and go and sort out my own return problem. And so that comes together in terms of you can get a yield in the Pilbara, in particular in a place like Karratha, of post 10%. That looks pretty attractive in comparison to some of the other investment options out there. Capital values have still been relatively stable in terms of them not jumping by 60-odd% like they did really quickly in the past.
Why, though? If you're saying we've got a 1% vacancy rate and it's super hot out there, why aren't we seeing it get back to prices that it was? And to be frank, like 10 years ago, we still haven't reached those Karratha prices, even though there has been a long run.
Yeah, and so I think that's probably what I mean by that. The step jumps haven't been crazy. I know I just said it's gone up 10% in 4 months, but that's what we were seeing every 4 months in that Karratha marketplace back when it was going really strongly. So I think the fact that it hasn't jumped up as quickly and it hasn't been as out of control has meant that buyers are slightly more comfortable. But as we're suggesting there, and as Mel's suggesting on the ground, that maybe we're in that phase now where it's just jumping a bit too quickly for investors to come and jump into that market. Yeah,
it surprises me. I didn't expect you to say that Karratha was red hot coming out of this. I thought we'd be talking about really having a watch on that city, we can call it now, to make sure that things aren't wavering at any point in time. Just given what we know globally about the risks in the iron ore market, which hits Karratha more than anyone else.
Yeah, absolutely.
How does that ripple out to Hedland then?
Yeah, so South Hedland's got a lot of transaction activity still. It's probably seen as a more affordable option. Again, the rental return in that location is really good, and the rents won't be going down anytime soon because of the lack of supply of both rental accommodation and owner-occupier accommodation. It's just not going up in value as quickly as Karratha.
Is that an affordability factor?
Yeah, and a quality of product. So there's some pretty disparate kind of everything from some very interestingly designed apartments in Port Hedland, really old timber frame accommodation, through to more modern accommodation, and some pretty interesting street design as well. So, yeah, it makes for a different type of marketplace, very different to Port Hedland up the road, which is holding its values and is relatively steady at this point in time. And that's a very simple demand and supply situation in the Port Hedland location.
Is it the sort of place that is a buy, or it's not a buy? It's just, again, if you're there, enjoy the fruits and keep an eye on it.
It's definitely a hold in terms of enjoying the rental return that you would already have. If you bought in a number of years ago, you'd be enjoying a very decent return. And look, again, each for their own in terms of investment into those marketplaces. They are more risky than most of the other locations, even across the whole of Australia, let alone Western Australia. Yeah.
So you'd rather be in Karratha than Hedland right now?
I would expect from a long-term point of view, as well as the quality of product that you're going to buy. Yeah.
Let's go to Gero.
Yeah, so Geraldton's still going strong. I know it's one of your favourite spots to talk about. I just thought I'd bring in a couple of examples in terms of value increase. So Rangeway, simple house, and what I think I should probably point out here to listeners is that this is the type of thing we're seeing from East Coast investors jumping into a marketplace. So I'm looking at the photo that our valuer took of this property in Rangeway. It's a really simple 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom house, 107 square metres of living area on 743 square metres of land. Think of the original Homes West type homes in the northern and southern suburbs of Perth. Really simple 50s, 60s type development put there to provide housing for people. It wasn't a lifestyle option. There's no design features about this. It hasn't got character. Probably got some timber floorboards. They're not there for character. They're there for function, right? And so this thing transacted in November 2024, $150,000. I know that listeners will be looking at their phones going, what did he just say? Yeah, so 150 grand for a house on a block of land. Now, that retransacted in April this year for $317,000. We think that's probably an East Coast investor, Perth investor coming through and still saying at $317,000 that this is really cheap. Now, that same product is heading towards $400,000 now, so it continues to grow. And when you get relative value across locations, you take that in Perth suburb, you're not really buying a house on that size block of land in any Perth suburb. In fact, in every single capital city across Australia and most large regional centres, you're going to struggle to buy something in that $350,000 to $400,000 range.
So it's pretty much just the buyer's agents have looked on the list of every suburb in Perth and gone, which one's the cheapest and how does that yield look?
Yeah.
And they've most likely never been there.
Yeah, and looking at the photo of this, the grass is a bit too long. Looks like it might have been painted on the outside. The tiling doesn't look fantastic on the roof, and I've only got the externals in front of me. There's a detached garage in the backyard. There's nothing exciting about this, but the rental yield will be fine. The value is probably going to hold up in terms of that capital value over a period of time. So potentially a buyer agent that has done their research in there can convince their customer that it's a good buy. As you've suggested in the past, Trent, I'd be sceptical in some of these suburbs. They do have socioeconomic issues through there. They look cheap for a reason. They were $150,000 at one point in time for a reason.
Yeah. Let's go to Exmouth. I know you're screaming to talk about your holiday town.
Yes, so Exmouth, it's still a huge amount of activity there. It's actually probably a really good example of sometimes in these smaller sized towns you can see how economy works a lot better. And so you've got your kind of tourism/tourist fishing industry going on there already. And now what's happening is that the defence industry, which has always been a part of that town, and it's the reason the town was established in 1967, that is resurging in terms of the investment from the federal government. There might even be some US government investment in there, but there's a large number of contractors in town for defence type purposes, and that can be everything from rebuilding local roads or roads on the couple of bases in town there through to doing infrastructure investment that we don't understand. There's some articles around recently, in fact on Four Corners on the ABC, about a request to significantly upgrade the ability to store fuel at the Learmonth Air Base there, which is the Exmouth airport that anyone that's been there will have flown into. So there's these types of projects in the background that take people on the ground to go and survey that, work out whether the land's suitable for it, do the design, do the setup for the piping and all those kinds of things that I don't understand. brings people to town, and guess what? They're there for more than one day. They might be there for a month, 2 months, a whole year to do those projects, and therefore they need somewhere to live, and there's not enough accommodation in town, hence why the prices go up.
Which of these 4 towns would you rather own property in
Well,
right now?
that's really interesting. I think from an optionality point of view, there's no tourism market in the first few that we mentioned there. Gero has a little bit of it. Obviously, Karratha and Port Hedland really predominantly don't. And climate-wise, I'd say Exmouth overlapping with the tourism side of things and the fact that you do have industry there driving the economy too, and then less risky in terms of maybe being hit, hopefully, cross fingers, touch wood, hit by weather events like cyclones and that kind of stuff.
You got a land subdivision up there, Sundrift happening. Does that not add a supplier that dampens price growth?
Yeah, so potentially it could. Interesting that they are able to get that out of the ground and getting through some significant marketing at this point in time. I think what we're seeing is that supply has consistently been brought to that marketplace over the last 3 or 4 years anyway, in terms of the remnant land that was within the marina and even some in the town centre, and the location has soaked it up. I can't remember the exact stat off the top of my head, but at one point in time the government needed 20 or 30 houses in town, so there's a lot of accommodation to be made up or supply to be brought to town before that gets oversupplied. Yeah.
Got you. Let's go to Cal.
Yeah, so Kalgoorlie is really interesting at this point in time. About a month or probably 2 months ago, it experienced a bit of a slowdown in terms of just a little touch on the brake pedal to see what was going on around the place. And just talking to our valuers that are out there weekly, that's come off again. The accelerator's down. There's a lot of activity, a lot of confidence around town. Clearly, the gold price is a significant factor in this in terms of bringing confidence to a marketplace like that.
Do you reckon there's some of the 5% scheme as well impacting local people getting in?
Yeah, so the interesting couple of things going on in there that are live at this point in time is Northern Star Resources have got a 800-bed mining camp approved. They've still got to build it. It's going to cost them $65 million to build that. So an approval doesn't mean that the supply's injected into town straight away. But
that sounds cheap. Is that just the beds are like on stretcher beds or something?
Yeah, they might be modular homes or something like that, but it is a workers' accommodation camp. The other thing we think that might be happening there is just the wages in Kalgoorlie, given the fact that there's more margin in gold mining now than there probably ever has been. Some of the wages might be catching up to what the wages have been in the Pilbara in the past, and that means that people are more prepared to spend their own cash in town. It's more likely that a miner might live in Kalgoorlie traditionally than the northwest, and so there's a few different markets going on there. So investors, owner-occupiers, and industry buying and maintaining accommodation for its workers in town as well. Yep.
Is it a buy?
Oh, look, I think it's still relatively well priced. Again, Cal's got some very interesting accommodation in terms of the quality side of things.
Very old accommodation.
Yeah, because it's such an old city. And you can get everything from a timber-framed single hallway dwelling that's built on the clay or the sand that's with minimal stumps and that kind of stuff, and it's on a lean, still transacts and still able to be occupied, through to obviously brand new housing. So you just need to be careful of what you're buying into. Yeah.
Okay. Let's move straight down to Albany if we can.
Yeah, so Albany's still really strong, underpinned by a massive lack of supply still. We've talked about their concept there before. And actually, this relates back to the start of our conversation. So the whole situation with Sydney, where there's only a certain amount of land that you can release within the Sydney metropolitan area.
Just because of the topography.
Exactly, because of harbours and rivers and mountains. It's not dissimilar in Albany. Big harbour, only so much land that's flat around that location that can be developed over a period of time. And so they are going to continue with their supply issue for a period of time.
There are a couple of areas, McHale and Lang, in Albany, that have development, both with Development WA as well as some private development going on there. So there's some supply coming through, but it seems to be getting soaked up. To the point where I'm now starting to see conversations around Mount Barker getting a look in. Are you seeing that as well?
Absolutely. So
what's that about? All I know about Mount Barker is they have chickens.
And a great pie shop. So the bakery is really
Are they chicken pies?
I'm sure that you can get chicken in the pie. I'm not sure how far they've walked to get there. But yeah, so we have heard a number of cases in doing valuations in both locations where the purchasers in Mount Barker are saying, I can't afford to be in Albany anymore and I'd prefer to be an owner-occupier. Mount Barker still looks cheap to me, so I'll go up the road. I can't remember. I think think it's about 70 k's, 50 k's up the road between Albany and Mount Barker. A couple of good pubs in town in Mount Barker. Shorter drive out to the Barongarups from there, or the Stirling Ranges. So, yeah, pretty interesting concept.
That concerns me a little bit, because that means that spill off of a regional area, that spill off of another regional area, which is spill off of Perth. Like, it's that many degrees down.
Yep.
I look at Mount Barker and think, there's an opportunity there to maybe be a developer down there, but I also think that's the first thing going if the rest of the regional market starts to soften at some point in time.
Yeah, and people would retract to those other locations.
Yeah.
So good suburbs in Albany and back to, say, Denmark. The other factor down there I think that is really strong is the relocation to regional areas, working from home, people taking that opportunity to go, I can now have fantastic internet speed through satellite in these locations, and I can work from home for the whole week at a time, or maybe 3 or 4 days out of each week, and commute between the other locations they need to be in. Yeah.
Honestly, I think the biggest factor that is impacting the southwestern market has been the onset of Airbnb.
Yep.
I think if Airbnb didn't exist, there will be thousands, tens of thousands of more rentals in the southwest available, which would solve all of this down there.
Yeah.
I still, to this day, can't reconcile with the idea that there are tens of thousands of people moving to the southwest and the Greater Southern area, and therefore soaking up all that supply. I think it's people just taking the supply off the market for Airbnb because it's so lucrative.
Yeah, and they get such a great rental return.
It's particular, like a fake demand.
Yeah, and if they've owned that property for a period of time, i.e. their debt's low on it, then the return gets even better.
Because remember, the rental market is the primary market. It is the lowest common denominator level. That's where you have shelter, right? So if you can't afford to own, you at the very least are renting. But if all the rental has been soaked up by this sub-market that didn't exist 15 years ago, and you can't even own anyway, then the whole market falls apart. And I think Albany is the best example of the extremes of what was a dead market for 60 years. And then in the space of the last few years, after COVID, everyone went down there for a holiday, realised it's bloody awesome, beautiful place to be, and then Airbnb has just gone massive on that. That's what I actually think is going on.
Yeah, there's one more factor there, and that would be retiring farmers coming to town. So they would be buying up property because they've done okay on their principal assets or business.
We know farmland has gone through the roof in the last few years.
Yeah, and so that succession planning through there, where they might already own one house in Albany and they go, hang on, we better buy some more for the future, might even be in the short term. The other factor in terms of that short-term accommodation in that marketplace is that there was not really any investment in new hotel-type accommodation for a very long period of time. So clearly they've got the new hotel down on the waterfront. I've stayed there. It's magnificent. The views are fantastic.
The Hilton.
Yes, the Hilton. But beyond that, there's not really a huge amount of other accommodation that has been built to that kind of luxury type level. And so therefore you get to the stage where people go, oh, there's a really nice Airbnb that I can get for this price versus staying in one of the older motels.
Whilst we have Sydney on the top of our head, how do the prices of places like Albany and the southwest compare to the regional spaces in New South Wales? First thing that comes to mind is like a Byron Bay. We're nowhere near that, are we?
No, that's a classic example of a market being driven by lifestyle and tourism.
But that's Albany, right?
Yeah. So over a period of time, potentially we get there maybe. But I'd suppose in our marketplace, you'd say that's going to happen to Dunsborough a bit more. And funnily enough, talking to Exmouth, lots of people that visit there from the East Coast like an Exmouth to a Byron Bay type vibe. It will be interesting to see whether Albany can fit in with that over a period of time, because we go back again, Byron Bay is Byron Bay because it is hemmed in by agricultural type uses, and there's only so many properties you can buy there and turn into Airbnb.
It's landlocked.
It's landlocked, and so it drives prices up over a period of time when the demand remains consistent.
So let's go over to Dunsborough then. You've oscillated between white hot and red hot for 4 years now, mate.
Yeah, and there
Which colour is it?
Everyone can go back and find the pod where I was not that confident, which is probably, I don't know, a year or 18 months ago. But look, it's still very strong in that marketplace, still very much driven by lifestyle opportunity, still very much driven by the lack of supply of product that people want to buy into certain segments. So you can go right across getting in price, what can I get down there for, say, sub $1 million? There's a few old two-bedroom type unit designs from the 70s and the 80s that might be somewhere between 500 and $1 million walking distance to Dunsborough, right through to lifestyle properties on the hills around town. They're all sitting up around $3 million now to buy something with a half-decent block of land and a half-decent house on there. And then up and down the beaches, a block of land now will cost you about $1.5 million underlying land value for a half-decent block of land within walking distance to the Dunsborough town centre.
That's another one where I think it suffers from the same issues as Byron Bay, which is probably makes your comment very accurate in that there really isn't a lot of developable land left in Dunsborough that isn't owned by the one family that has like a quarter of Dunsborough's urban land left, who are also own Eagle Bay Brewing Company.
Yes.
Like the amount of land they own that's left, it's pretty much all of them.
Yeah.
Right? So if they want to release some land, there's some supply. Otherwise, there's nothing left in Dunsborough really, with Dunsborough Lake pretty much being done.
Back end of Dunsborough Lakes looks really full. So for those that don't know it or do know it, they're out the back there towards Simo's Ice Cream, you'll be able to see all of those houses being finished. There's no more land left to sell there.
Yeah. And we've only just seen one low-density apartment building come up.
Yep.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
But there's not anything else on the horizon down there, is there?
Yeah, Steve Palmer's put forward a residential medium-rise apartment complex on his winery. Palmer's on the way into town there before the first major roundabout, but I would expect that it would be very difficult to make that feasible, as in get it out of the ground and actually get it built, just because of the cost of construction. It almost doesn't matter what you ask for the apartments. It's just going to be a very difficult project to manage. And again, that will be the same through Dunsborough Town Centre when they try and add some density through there as well.
Which they should. But yeah, again, even if they tried, the money side doesn't really work. How about Busso?
Yeah, Busselton is still really strong. Actually, I've got a sale example for you just to give listeners an idea of where this moved from maybe a subdued market in August 2021. We're talking about a house that's 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, 104 square metres of living area, 1-car garage on a 700 square metre block of land, more modern than the one that we referred to in Geraldton. This is a double brick design with a tile roof. Transacted in August 2021 at $300,000. In May this year, that transacted for $760,000. That will now look cheap. If you go and look at that in September, October, November now, we're heading towards $1 million for that type of product. In the suburb of Busselton itself, on the southern side of town there, pretty standard product through there, very much an owner-occupier for that location in history, potentially now being bought by people that are desperate for a holiday home in that area.
Is it the airport, the new highway, is the confluence of those two things that have impacted Busselton in a way to make it more accessible? Because the rest of it's pretty nice.
Yeah, so I think it's also the evolution of that lifestyle or that livability. If you had one of those fancy livability indexes, things like restaurants, cafes, pubs in the location have all stepped up their game. Speaking of Hiltons, there's a brand new one of those down on the beach there. I've seen some photos of the function room there. They've been smart enough to put it on the roof of the building. You're looking out all over the bay. Same with some of the other new breweries in town, that kind of facility. Even the shopping centre in terms of it being renovated and having places to eat and grab coffee. So I think that evolves in terms of the city maturing. Then that connects with the other things. So accessibility is easy now, whether you're coming on a plane or driving down. I think that the tourism thing from the East Coast into Busselton Airport is a really big thing into the future. It needs a lot of word of mouth. My colleagues that live in that location frequently are using that method to get to the East Coast now, and it's only a matter of time to the tourists understand that that's how you get to Margaret River now. You just fly in and then drive half an hour down the road and you're drinking the best red wine in the world.
Just bypass Perth.
Yeah.
And there goes Airbnb again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really.
Yeah.
Is it a scourge on the property market, Airbnb?
Oh, it's really hard because the hotel prices across capital cities in Australia are very expensive, whether you be in a regional location too. In terms of taking a family on a holiday, I've struggled to find problem with it in that it makes accommodation available for families to go to, and in particular if you're sharing between multiple families, it can make holiday really affordable.
So you reckon it creates a multiplier for the economy? If you don't have the Airbnb, people don't come.
Yes, absolutely. I think it's made travel more available. Absolutely.
So is it just a structural shift in our whole property typology that we're struggling through over the course of at least 10 years now, where Airbnb continues to come in where it's demanded, but we're not responding in replacing the rental market that it has sucked supply out of at the same time, and therefore we're just left caught on the back foot?
Yes. And so again, This comes back to that really simple supply construction side of the equation. So if you tried to supply short-term accommodation into all of those marketplaces that we've just talked about, so put a hotel in Busselton, put a unit complex in Busselton within the last 10 years, same as Albany, it's really expensive to do that.
And to manage as well.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get a childcare centre down in Albany,
Yeah.
and the cost to do it is about 25% more than doing it in Perth. Now, I thought Albany cheaper, probably could do with the work. Nah.
Yep.
They're charging more and they're working less.
Yeah.
And therefore, it costs 25% more to get the same thing in Albany than it does in Perth.
Yep.
And you think, bloody hell, man, that's exactly what the reality is for people trying to build their own home.
Yeah. Yeah, and then again, if we harp on that accommodation side of things from a tourism point of view, I think that's actually been a detriment to the WA tourism industry for a long period of time, that we don't have next level accommodation in lots of these areas. And if you think about the fact that Twiggy owns a development site in a prime location in Exmouth and hasn't been able to make that viable over the last 3 or 4 years, RAC doing a lot of work through their parks up and down the west coast. Actually, only one of them have they undertaken, which is the Coral Bay one, where they're undertaking a significant reconstruction, basically because they'll be able to get really decent room rates. And ironically, the best accommodation that's probably been built in a regional area across WA in the most, probably last 5 years, is actually Rottnest.
That's true.
2 brand new hotels.
Yeah, and that's probably because it's the safest one as well.
And then everyone that's tried to book one will understand why it's viable, because the room rate is through the roof.
That's right.
Goes back to your Airbnb argument. So trying to put a family in 2 hotel rooms at Rottnest doesn't work.
That's right.
Yep.
Finally, Bunbury.
Yeah, Bunbury is still really active. Still a good price point for most suburbs in Bunbury at this point in time. Investors have come through there and had a look. They are still pretty active and rents are still really strong. And I must emphasise, so we are now talking about places like Australind being up around the $750,000 mark. I always liken those subdivisions through that location and into Eton as being like suburban Perth as well. So they were really affordable. They're a bit like Ellenbrook. You would have got in there a year to a year and a half ago for sub $600,000. Really easy for a good 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom house with a double garage on 500 to 600 square metre block of land. That is now heading towards and past $750,000. So it gives you an idea of where that market's heading.
What it's doing is it's minimising the delta between the Perth house and land package and the Bunbury one.
Yeah. Yep.
What does that then therefore say for the competitive advantage and value proposition of going there, really?
Yeah. So
I'm not going down to live outside Bunbury if it's going to be very similar price to living outside Perth.
Yeah. So then it becomes a lifestyle opportunity, like it might be family, friends, closer to the beach, those kinds of things. You might be a FIFO type worker and find that's a more comfortable location for you to be in. Maybe less stressful is probably the other thematic there in terms of not being in the metro area of Perth and the difficulty of getting around every day.
Mate, thank you so much for the update. Final regional update for the year.
Yes.
And who would have thought we'd finish it with probably the most bullish reflections on our regional centres that we've had in the last 3 or 4 years.
Yep.
I genuinely didn't think that and this comes back to my self-deprecating bias of West Australia's property market, I didn't think we'd be in late 2025 talking about the regional markets with a confidence that not only has it been smashing records, but it's going to continue to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's just remember that the waves of value increase that come out of Perth also flow up into the Swan Valley and then Avon Valley. There's some significant value increases through there.
York, Northam.
Yep, all of those kinds of locations. But yeah, and obviously it goes into those other regional locations that we've just talked about.
Cheers, mate.
Thanks, Trent.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Perth Property Show. If you've only just joined the conversation, you can catch up by heading over to our website, perthpropertyshow.com.au, subscribing to the podcast, or joining our Facebook page. Don't forget to tune in next Monday at 7 a.m. for more expert insights, local analysis, and suburb spotlights. Happy hunting!